So I did a collaboration with Night and Art a while ago where I orchestrated some Batman music and a video on his channel, and you're going to hear pieces of that medley in this video. If you want to hear the whole cover, click the link pinned in the comments down below. Hey guys, it's Ben. So if you took the time to get to know me, one of the things that you're going to know is that I absolutely love soundtracks. In particular, I really like Hans Zimmer soundtracks. So much so to the point that my friends actually know how much I love Hans Zimmer soundtracks, that about 2 weeks ago, a friend of mine walked up to me and said, "Hey Ben, would you mind doing a hot take for me?" And me, of course, I do like doing a hot take myself, I was happy to oblige. He looks me in the face and he says, "What is Hans Zimmer's best piece of music?" I sat back and I had to think about this for a minute because that's a big question. There are so many different really good pieces of music. Time, Father and Son, the theme from Planet Earth 2, Davy Jones, Now We Are Free. So many epic pieces of music written by Hans Zimmer. I just listed a few of them, but it got me thinking, hey, I make music-related content on my channel. What if I made a tier list ranking of every Hans Zimmer soundtrack? Only to find out that that is easier said than done. Yeah, so I'm not sitting down to watch 150 films, so we're gonna have to set some ground rules for this video. In this video, I'm gonna be ranking the soundtracks for the films that I personally have seen. Also, I'm not gonna be covering films where Hans Zimmer worked in collaboration with someone to do the soundtrack. The only exceptions that I'm gonna be making to this are Batman Begins, Kung Fu Panda, and Pirates of the Caribbean. The reason why is because he worked in collaboration with someone on those first films, but then he did the rest of the films in the series on his own. So that means if I'm just doing solo films, I'd be doing the Dark Knight trilogy, but not Batman Begins, the Kung Fu Panda trilogy, but not Kung Fu Panda. I'm making a little exception for those films because it would just be unsatisfying to do every film except the first one. So without any further ado, let's get into it. Sherlock Holmes 2. I personally think the second Sherlock Holmes film was a little better than the first one. That's just me personally. But at the same time, it didn't seem like it had anything in particular that completely set it apart. It was still a pretty good soundtrack. Hans Zimmer films, what he tends to do is he finds a particular sound and then he uses that sound to tell the story. And when it comes to Sherlock Holmes, he definitely found the sound for the first movie, and that it's a great soundtrack. Sherlock Holmes, I feel like, is that one exception where it maintains the sound of being a Sherlock Holmes film, but it didn't particularly do anything outside of the ordinary. I'm gonna put you in C. Pirates of the Caribbean 2. This was a good one. This movie did something that I love when film scores do. It's when you incorporate a piece of diegetic music that exists in a part of the universe and incorporate it into the score. Because Davy Jones's theme is, it's a locket that he then plays on an organ, which is then incorporated into the score. You are gonna be A tier. Madagascar. Okay, the first Madagascar film, I'm gonna be honest, it had really catchy music, but outside of the main theme of the Zeusters Breakout, it doesn't seem to have anything in particular that makes it outstanding. Which I mean, come on, when you're talking about the first Madagascar, or any of the Madagascar films, honestly, it's kind of hard to go too deep.
You? Oh man, where are the people?
We killed them and ate their livers.
It's a fun soundtrack with a fun theme, and for that, it has my respect. Kung Fu Panda 2. This is like Zimmer in his element. Another one of the things that he does is he tends to add like the main motifs, like you get the main theme, you have like your main ideas and musical thoughts that you need to express. But then another thing that he does is he tends to add in a lot of these little small motifs that just add to the flavor of the world building. And Kung Fu Panda is one of those series that has so many little tiny, very simple motifs that just add to the feeling, and then you add to the connection of the characters, specifically when it comes to Poe.
Stairs.
I really like Shen's theme in this and how well everything else is orchestrated, because this is probably the most emotional out of all 3 Kung Fu Panda films, and Zimmer did not hold back. I'm gonna put you in B. And now we're getting into some Christopher Nolan films. Interstellar. I'm gonna be honest with you, Interstellar, I like the Interstellar soundtrack. It's good, it's decent. But at the same time, I am very much a motif-centered, a melody-centered kind of guy, and the Interstellar soundtrack It almost sounds like he was trying to embrace the simplicity of how everything is structured. I really like the work that Zimmer did as a sound engineer when he worked on this film. Using an organ to represent space was probably one of the best choices, and apparently that actually was an idea from Christopher Nolan, that he wanted Zimmer to use an organ in the soundtrack. The main theme, it's epic, it's catchy, but it's so simple, and yet some people would say, I can even see how you would understand the beauty being in the simplicity of this theme. For me though, it's like it lacks enough of a melody to be really up there. It's pretty good, I enjoy it. You're gonna be right there. The Amazing Spider-Man 2. So as a whole, the two Andrew Garfield Amazing Spider-Man films, they don't really have any musical continuity whatsoever. I mean, you shifted composers. I haven't really noticed any musical continuity. I remember hearing someone describe one time, he said the first Spider-Man movie, the music just makes you want to understand the feeling and emotion of who Peter Parker was and understanding his story. But then the theme for Amazing Spider-Man 2, it just makes you want to stand up and salute. This is another example of where I enjoy the soundtrack a whole lot more than the film. I'm gonna put you right here. Move. There you go. Batman Begins. Okay. Again, this is another example of when Hans Zimmer utilizes a sound to set an overall tone, but then B, using a lot of really small motifs to just add so much flavor. Batman Begins. How do I feel about this one? This may be my favorite Batman soundtrack. Well, not sure if I can say that. It's a really good soundtrack. It establishes everything well. It perfectly sets up the world, and you get into the character and the feeling and the emotion of Batman, which honestly, at this point, that hadn't really been done before, at least in mainstream. Do I like you better than Dead Man's Chest? I think I do. The Dark Knight Rises. This is, again, another example of Hans Zimmer taking a film and giving it its own individual sound, while at the same time maintaining major continuity. Dark Knight Rises is a very, very powerful score. And again, it utilizes that trick of what I mentioned before for Dead Man's Chest, where you take a piece of diegetic music that exists as a part of the universe and then utilize it in the score. Because when they have that moment of everybody chanting to have him rise out, they have that rhythm of the desha, desha, bassa, bassa. They have that rhythm, that one rhythm of just everybody chanting, it is all over the score. And then there are other examples of just the choir doing the desha, desha, bassa in the background, and then understanding that that's the in-universe continuity of meaning rise. It's really good. It's great. This is probably one of the deepest Batman soundtracks, and it goes there. Not quite sure it compares to the emotion of Batman Begins, but it definitely goes here. The Last Samurai. Okay. Fun fact about this movie, I discovered this movie because of the soundtrack. I was listening to an Amazon music mix, and then all of a sudden this Japanese style music started playing. I was, oh, that's interesting. What is that? And so I looked at it and it said, The Last Samurai soundtrack, Hans Zimmer. And of course I was like, ooh, that's intriguing. Now, me, of course, I do like a good war movie, and this film itself, none of the characters were real. It's not historically accurate. But at the same time, when you take a look at the story they were trying to tell, it was really, really done well. Honestly, the music itself just sells the story for me. I mean, they had a very strong narrative in the film that they were trying to tell, but the music itself just sells it for me. This is probably an example of just embracing the idea of several small motifs to tell the larger story, and it just adds so much flavor to the film. You go here. Move. Poe, you go there. Pirates of the Caribbean on Stranger Tides. This is, I think, another example of when I enjoy the soundtrack a lot more than the movie. On Stranger Tides, it was a really good soundtrack in the sense that it did what Zimmer always does. He takes the narrative, he establishes it into a musical form. You go there. The Dark Knight soundtrack. This one is gonna get tricky. Musical continuity, it has its own individual sound, but I think a lot of the individuality of this film is because of the music that was utilized for the Joker's character, which was actually done really well. I like how he represented the two major sides of the Joker that we see in the film, with just 2 notes dragged across the violin to represent his insanity, and then 2 notes played on an electric guitar to represent every time he does something evil. It's a really good soundtrack, and it utilizes a lot from being built off of the world of Batman Begins. You know what? Let's put you right there. Gladiator. Okay. Like I said before, I like a good war movie. This is another example of differing thoughts of soundtrack to film. Me personally, Gladiator, I don't know what it was. Maybe it was just like the kind of person I was when I first watched the film. Maybe it wasn't what I expected it to be, but I didn't get Gladiator. I know that this was a film that's really big, and understandably so, I mean, I'm kind of...
It was at this moment that he knew.
Honestly, I'm kind of nervous to see what the comment section's gonna look like now.
And so, we shall go to war.
But that being said about the film itself, I don't even think I need to give an explanation. Moving on to Kung Fu Panda 3. Honestly, this has one of my favorite setups in the entirety of Zimmer films, which is to have the motif of father and son to then set up the track of the Dragon Warrior. Honestly, the Dragon Warrior is one of the best final climaxes to a film that I've seen in a while, mostly because of how everything is utilized. It's not this epic showdown, it's this triumphant moment. You go there. And then we get to Muppet Treasure Island. Okay, so, you know, Hans Zimmer shows up in the strangest areas, and you're like, oh, really? He scored that movie? Something that this film did that I have a huge respect for when it comes to Zimmer is when you compare it to Pirates of the Caribbean. Now, something that is very easy to do is when you give a similar genre or a similar storyline, it's going to be very easy for you to basically rip yourself off in terms of the way that you score your music, but they are distinctly different sounding soundtracks, and it's really, really well done.
Shiver my timbers, shiver my soul, yo-ho-me-ho.
It goes right here. Madagascar 2. Now, this movie, I think, had the best soundtrack out of the entire series. He basically took the main theme and then set it up to be taking place in Africa, which was really well done. But I also like the song that was set up for the beginning and the end of the film, which was like a nice little bookend for the film itself. It's a fun film. It's great. It goes there. No. You go there. It almost got a little bit too hasty there. Sherlock Holmes. Okay, I want to talk about establishing a tone for your movie. This is the perfect musical equivalent of Sherlock Holmes as an action hero. This again is an example of embracing the beauty of simplicity, because the Sherlock Holmes theme, it's so simple. It's literally just walking up and down in half steps, and it's so simple, but it works so well. Yeah, you go there. You go there. Okay, so also as I'm looking at this, I'm realizing that a lot of this really needs to just go down here. You know, actually, Muppet Treasure Island, you as a whole, you gotta beat Madagascar. Okay. Man of Steel. Again, another example of a soundtrack being way better than the film. Man of Steel, kind of an average movie, but the soundtrack, it's great. It's great. So I remember when I was a kid when Man of Steel first came out, and I was obsessed with the soundtrack. There was a particular track, it was called An Idea of Hope, which was basically the trailer music for the entirety of the film. When it comes to the musical representation of everything that went into this film, this is how you score Superman. And that's coming from someone who has a huge respect for John Williams and everything that he did for his original Superman theme. But when you take a closer look at Man of Steel and then have the understanding of the theme was meant to be hope, he was an idea of hope, he's meant to give people hope. Using the piano to represent Superman with the theme of your film being hope, it works so well. Man of Steel was a mediocre film, but it was an excellent soundtrack. Madagascar 3, yeah, that's an easy one. I mean, it had the main theme, but outside of that, there was like nothing that set it apart. It almost feels like most of the budget for the soundtrack went to using the royalties for that one song, the fireworks song that they played during the circus scene. Mission Impossible 2. Okay, I'm gonna be honest with you. I re-listened to some of the tracks for this film in preparation for this video, and it was very, how do I put this? It was very generic. Now, when it comes to scoring a Mission Impossible film, like, everybody's done this, okay? Hans Zimmer's done it, Michael Giacchino's done it, Lauren Balfe's done it, but the problem is, with this film, it's like, it overly was using a lot of, like, extra synth just to give it that 80s feel to it. Now, I'm not against synth, quite the opposite, in fact. It just had too much the feeling of a very generic 80s film. Yeah, I like you a little bit more than Madagascar 3, and that's mostly because it had the main theme. But I mean, it's not even like you can do your own original score for Mission Impossible. Lauren Balfe did it for Fallout, and that was an incredible score. Pirates of the Caribbean. This is the one that started it all. I mean, come on, how can you not love this film?
Illegio muerta, remember? You shot me. No, I didn't.
But this soundtrack was great. It perfectly established the world building. Again, this was another example of adding several different motifs to add flavor and spice to the world building. It was a great soundtrack, one of his greatest main themes of all time. You go here. Original Kung Fu Panda, perfectly utilizing his work as a sound engineer, creating an individual sound that sets you apart from the rest while at the same time telling the story that needs to be told. And also utilizing Igudesman as basically the musical construct of Kung Fu itself. Such a powerful score.
There's a saying, yesterday is history, tomorrow is a mystery, but today is a gift. That is why it is called the present.
Kung Fu Panda goes here. The Lion King. You go there. You know what? Actually, yeah, I mean, we gotta do that. In terms of the score itself, I'm not sure how much work he did on a lot of the musical aspect of this film, like Be Prepared and stuff like that, because if we're rating this on just the musical work, then that's going to be a different story. But when it comes to a lot of the Disney Renaissance films, they basically had someone write the score and then someone write the musical numbers. The score, it was really, really well done. It had the emotional moments, it had the beats, it did its job, it was really fun. It showed its individuality in terms of the score. Other than that, there wasn't really much else that he could do because the majority of the work was put on the musical numbers itself. But I mean, still, come on. Did an excellent job. Pirates of the Caribbean at World's End. My personal favorite Pirates film and my personal favorite soundtrack out of the entire Pirates of the Caribbean storyline. This movie was the culmination of everything. You've got Davy Jones' theme, you've got Jack Sparrow's theme, you've got literally every other motif that's been set up in the Pirates of the Caribbean universe. And the love theme for Will and Elizabeth is by all means incredible. Okay, it goes right there. Inception. This is not one of those emotionally jarring scores. It's not one of those motif-centered. This is the example of Hans Zimmer as a sound engineer at his best. It's almost like Christopher Nolan walked up to him and said, so, Hans, how much brass do you want in this soundtrack? And then Zimmer was just like, yes. It is an incredibly just jarring soundtrack, and it is incredible. It goes right here. Rango. Okay, I'm gonna be honest with you, I just saw this film for the first time about a month ago. It's really interesting when you go into the behind the scenes of all the work that went into this film and realize that it was basically meant to be a narrative on Western cliches that exist.
Now, we ride.
That means we're riding now. This moment.
It knew what the movie was, it knew what the score needed to be, and it is better than Madagascar 2. Wonder Woman 84. Okay, I think I need some explaining to do. For you to understand just why this is his worst soundtrack, you need to understand everything that goes into scoring the character of Batman. I'm not even joking. When you're watching Batman v Superman, the musical narrative and understanding of what went into the music is, from what I can tell and pull out from it, is that we are watching the story of a Batman who is no longer Batman.
Well, there's a new kind of mean in him. He is angry,
But then again, when you go a little bit deeper into understanding the narrative of why Batman is actually going to versus Superman, it's because of a deception. That is the main theme that goes into the film, is the theme of deception, which is exclusively reserved to represent Batman and his motivations. Wonder Woman 84, on the other hand, decided, you know what? We're going to take that motif and then we're going to play it over Wonder Woman debunking a lie set up by Mando himself.
And you cannot have it all. You can only have the truth.
If Wonder Woman had been talking to Bruce in that moment, that would have made so much more sense.
And the truth is enough.
Why did you say that, Dad?
The truth is beautiful. And look at what your wish is costing it. You must be the hero. Only you can save the day. Because you're not the only one who has suffered. Who wants more. Who doesn't want to be afraid anymore.
But overall, the Wonder Woman 84 soundtrack, it's just thrown off to me because of how they undermine literally everything that was set up in the previous film. And it hurts too much. And there you have it, my tier listing of most of Hans Zimmer's scores and how I believe that they work and why I believe that they work. And to my friend who asked me to do a hot take about Hans Zimmer, I did my hot take about Hans Zimmer. Sorry you asked. And with that, I think that's going to wrap things up today. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoy musical content like this, maybe consider subscribing. Comment your thoughts about Hans Zimmer soundtracks, and I will see you next time.